A major new study confirms that PCR tests are horribly inaccurate. Now, there is a surprise. According to researchers at the University of Oxford, if you've heard of it, a third of people who tested positive for coronavirus via PCR tests were not contagious and did not need to self-isolate. A third. The study found that many laboratories are setting the positivity bar very low, meaning they're picking up people who are, quotes, a danger to no one. This follows a change in focus halfway through the pandemic in relation to hand sanitizing. Do you remember our blistered skin in March 2020? Sing happy birthday twice as you wash your hands? Crazy. After which, a couple of scientists with half a brain cell pointed out that the virus is transmitted through the air via aerosols. No sugar Sherlock. How about this one? A report came out in August of last year suggesting those environmentally catastrophic perspex screens that you see in shops, offices and on TV may make matters worse. The Environmental Modelling Group, a panel of 16 SAGE experts, said there's some epidemiological and mechanistic evidence that suggests screens could increase risks of aerosol transmission due to blocking or changing airflow patterns or creating zones of poor air circulation. Well done, everyone. What about cloth face masks that we've been ordered to wear at such environmental, societal and economic cost? Lockdown-loving CNN's chief medical reporter said just last month that you should not wear a cloth mask, that they are facial furniture. Cloth masks and those plasticky blue surgical masks, which are not accepted in Austria or Germany, make up the vast majority of the masks that we've been wearing in this country. Even where countries have demanded better N95 masks, like in Austria, cases have skyrocketed. Go figure. What happened to follow the science? What about vaccine passports? We're saving lives, aren't we? Except that cases have continued to soar in countries that have implemented these divisive measures which link your medical status to certain basic rights, freedoms and privileges, including, in particular, France and Italy, where the vaccine passports have clearly failed, but also closer to home, here in Wales and Scotland. What about closing nightclubs? The Welsh First Minister, Mark Drakeford, who likes a boogie himself, was not able to demonstrate any evidence that closing nightclubs would have an impact on spread. Evidence-based policy, along with free speech and common sense, has been another casualty of the pandemic. What about lockdowns themselves? 2 years in which we've incarcerated the healthy, stopped people from going out to work and making a living. We've closed once viable businesses, wrecked mental health and ignored worse diseases like cancer. What do we have to show for it? Well, the Telegraph are reporting that up to 87,000 cancer diagnoses may have been missed. 87,000 and the rest. If you think COVID is worse than cancer, then there's something wrong with you. But that has been the message of the pandemic response. If it's not COVID, they don't care. That's something I've heard from so many of you over the last 2 years. The famously deadly disease of cancer that affects all age groups has been relegated in importance for 2 years, with tragic consequences that will be with us for a long time to come, with cases like young mothers who didn't get that lump checked or weren't able to. Well done, everyone. There will be a day of reckoning for what Professor Jay Bhattacharya, one of the most respected medics in the world, has called the biggest public health mistake in history. Well, he's being polite. In my view, it was the mother of all cock-ups. So who's to blame if it was a mistake? Well, weak politicians who panicked in March 2020 and discarded decades of pandemic planning, something to which Sweden actually committed. They stayed with the existing pandemic strategy. Sweden have seen a fraction of the economic damage, the societal damage, and they've had fewer per capita deaths than so many countries that locked down hard. I blame the modelers, like the randy Professor Pants Down himself, Neil Ferguson, who predicted 500,000 deaths at the start of the pandemic, which spooked ministers into taking this ruinous path. Some government scientific advisors predicted 6,000 deaths a day if we didn't cancel Christmas. Take a look at this from The Guardian. Look at that. UK scientists are saying bring in curbs now or face up to 2 million daily COVID infections as Omicron spreads, 6,000 deaths a day. And that was in December. 6,000 deaths a day. You couldn't make it up. It was clear at that point from South Africa that Omicron was milder than a last of the summer wine cast reunion. I blame SAGE as well, who failed to equate economic damage with death. The University of Bristol have spoken to me in an interview linking the pandemic to a huge reduction in life. 300 years, of course, is the scale at which we've had a last big recession, and they would argue that lives will be lost as a result. But not just lost lives. What about wrecked lives? It's a question no one has ever been able to answer me. Why is it okay to wreck lives? Of course, it isn't, but wreck them we did. And it's most reprehensible when you think of the needless impact on young people and children who face a vanishing threat from the virus. So who else do I blame? Well, I blame the media. I won't call them the mainstream media because we are mainstream too, baby. Our numbers are growing like wildfire. Over 4 billion people have watched on digital since we started, and I'm personally normally beating Sky News at about this time. So tell your friends, tell your family, spread the word, and let's change the world together. But I blame others in the media for offering just one narrative. Lockdowns work, masks work, and absolutely everybody's got to have the vaccine, come what may. Now, these views are valid. Arguably, they're shared by a majority of the public and perhaps most scientific professionals. That's what they think, no problem. Let's hope that they're right, because that's the hell they've put us through. But as data comes from around the world based upon different approaches with no obvious difference in outcomes from where I'm standing, I've got my doubts. But remember those press conferences, the Beeb, Sky, ITV, always the journalists asking why are we not locking down longer, tougher, harder? By offering such one-sided coverage of the pandemic, by betting everything on the words of SAGE, and by freezing out other scientific voices like Sunetra Gupta, Carl Hennigan, Martin Kulldorff and Jay Bhattacharya, in my view, the media let us down. Now, to say that the media have lied to you is a bit strong, but they have not provided the full picture in relation to COVID. And any lawyer will tell you concealing information is tantamount in its own way to an untruth. Should we be polite? Should we just be polite and call it government propaganda? I think that'll do. Now, I shouldn't name names, but I will. The Mail and the Telegraph are the only papers I can think of that have consistently balanced their reporting and have dared to offer a critique about these debatable lockdowns. The Guardian, on the other hand, whilst being a paper that I've always admired and read every day, has been disappointing. Where was their coverage of the Johns Hopkins University report, a meta-analysis of 24 studies into lockdown, suggesting the measures saved 0.2% of lives, whilst, of course, exacting colossal harm? Now, this wasn't peer-reviewed, and the study has been done by economists, but worth reporting, I think you'll agree. This is Johns Hopkins University. It's not some nutter tweeting from his grandma's bedroom. Here is the professor, an eminent economist, who ran the study, blasting his own college and the media for not publicising the study as it doesn't fit the narrative. There's a surprise. Now, poor people have especially been impacted by the measures, so you would have thought the Guardian, supposedly left-leaning, would care about that. In the end, I think the media have got this wrong. They've backed the wrong horse, and in my view, they are on the wrong side of history. So there will be a day of reckoning for their one-sided coverage. But will we ever get an admission of guilt, or, dare I say it, an apology? Well, I doubt it. There will be no contrition. And for all of those well-paid and high-profile figures in the media, we know who they are, the relentless cheerleaders for these disastrous and, in my view, failed measures. Sorry seems to be the hardest word.